Good evening, and welcome to this episode of the Hearts of Men podcast, sponsored by the Empowering Perspective community. We are your hosts for this evening's conversation, and as always, this is going to be another one of those phenomenal conversations. I am the mindset coach, Mr. Dwayne Dwyer, and I am joined by three of four of the amazing men that kind of join me on this conversation. So over here, that way, Mr. Uncle Junior himself, Mr. Garfield Martin. Below me is my brother from another mother across the table with Chris McClellan. And to his right is Mr. Keep It Rolling Down the Street,
That
Mr.
way.
Willie Walker. Gentlemen, how are you this fine Friday evening?
I'm well. I'm well.
Made it to another
Well,
Friday.
later.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Listen, man, do you guys get excited about this like I
I
do?
do.
I
Yep.
think with this one, I got a little nervous.
Don't be nervous, man. Don't be nervous.
I-
It'll be good.
I told my job that I could not work Friday nights.
Really?
That's
Yes.
what I'm talking about.
Oh, man, I feel honored.
Just don't bother scheduling me because I'm not coming.
Wow.
Okay,
That's
I
amazing.
like it.
That is
that's
amazing.
love.
So I hope everybody who is hearing this, I hope you understand how important you are to us. Because this young man said he can't work on Friday nights. I love it. I love it. Listen, if this is your first time joining us on Friday evening, I ask that you go ahead and look in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. There is an icon down there. Put your cursor over that. You'll see a flyout that says subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe. Share this with your loved ones. Invite them to this conversation because this is going to, like we were talking about before, this is going to be a heavy lift. I think we're going to uncover some things that are going to be very instrumental when it comes down to our growth and development, not just individually, but overall as a community. Listen to the individuals in the chat. They're already here. Shout out Lisa Keys, Michelle Ray, Wanda Webb. Good to see you. Man, we appreciate you guys for joining us. And again, if this is your first time, go ahead and get in the chat. Let us know that you're here. Look at Londa. What's up, Londa? That's my cousin, y'all. You know, man, I love seeing family pop up in here. Sherry Sweet, good to see you. Bernadette Simmons, welcome to the show. Listen, man, you guys are already on it. I want to be honest. Cassandra, good to see you. Good to see you. I want to be honest, right? This is going to be one of those conversations. Now, me and the gentleman, we had a conversation backstage, and we're just going to be completely transparent. It might be some things that make people feel uncomfortable. Listen, I got it. And some of us may not necessarily breach every topic in this conversation. That's okay, right? But just listen, consider, and think about some of the things that we're talking about. Now, as we dive into this conversation again, keep loading up the chats already because we want some of your feedback. We want your comments. We also want to know how you handle some of these things and what you're seeing in your particular areas and communities as well. So we're going to get started because y'all know I like definition. Childhood trauma. And I want to send a special shout out to Sherry Sweet because she was the one that kind of got us on this topic, and I thought it was a good topic. And as we talked about it, we kind of came up with the general topic and just kind of dove into it. So thank you, Sherry, for this amazing topic. Childhood trauma. Childhood trauma is the experience of a single or multiple events by a child that is emotionally painful or distressful, which often leads to serious lifelong damages to physical and mental health. Childhood trauma has become a major social public health problem worldwide. Now, I want to make sure that we be completely honest because some of the stuff goes on for years and years and years, and we're totally unaware of that. And I think as we're going into it, you will see it unfold. And as we always do, we like to show you guys that we're human and we're completely honest and transparent. I'm going to keep the definition rolling so you guys can see it as well. So, gentlemen, as we always do every week, we're going to do a quick self reflection. How has childhood trauma manifested itself in your adult life? Your thoughts?
Okay, uh, I think I have so many that I didn't even know that I had until certain things reared its head. Even how I'm just gonna go with minimalistically. I grew up in an environment where you always had to protect yourself and you always had ammunition and weapons on you at all times. Whether it was we had shotguns at the front door and the back door, grew up around guns, drugs, and things like that. So even today, where I live, I would growing up, I would call this the suburbs. You don't have. I can leave my door unlocked, cars unlocked, and all that other stuff, but I don't. But it's ingrained in me still to this day to walk around. I tell people if I'm not in the shower or a swimming pool, I have some type of gun on me because that's how I grew up, and because of traumatic experiences with people, busting in or things happening. It's like, man, this is gonna protect me. Not really, but it's just stuck in my head, and that's just on the minimalistic side of childhood trauma, just to jumpstart this thing.
I dive out there. Listen, I think it's quite obvious. We talk about it all the time. I kind of went most of my childhood life without a father.
Hmm.
And, even though I did not get into the details of the demise of their relationship, I did witness, when I was younger, them fighting, like literally physically fighting. Um, and I don't think we really understand or even conceptualize what that actually does to a child. Seeing the fight that actually happened, going, blow for blow, and then, kind of processing that, and then that kind of transfers and move forward into, kind of like some of what your relationships look like. Granted, for me, I've never did anything of that nature, but by that same token, you have to understand that that was something that I had to process and overcome, and then it was something that my mother had my mother had a conversation with me when I was younger, and she told me, she like, whatever you do, promise me that you would never put your hands on a woman. And I appreciate the fact that she had that conversation with me, even though it really wasn't a conversation; it was a request for her by her. But again, I appreciate her doing that because it kind of gave me the idea, or kind of helped me to process what I was afraid to talk to her about.
Hmm.
So again, the absence of my father, seeing them fight, seeing other people, going to school, and you're seeing other people's parents showing up for them, both parents, not just one, right? Both parents showing up for them, and then processing that in my head, not having both parents, but just having one. So you have to understand the trauma that has gone forward, moving forward into an adulthood life, and then now as an adult, what does that look like? How do you show up for relationships? How do you process that concept of relationship? What does that look like for me as a man? And how do I conceptualize that for her as a woman? So it's all of those things, when it came down to how I processed it or how I viewed it as a child.
Hmm.
Um, if we're talking about how the trauma itself manifests in my adult life, I'm finding myself having to stand up for myself a lot because I never did it when I was younger. I was always afraid to. I remember my mom told me I wasn't allowed to fight when I was in kindergarten when a kid pushed me into the bushes and I hit him so hard he had to have 50 stitches over his right eye in kindergarten. Ever since then, I've had my mom's voice in the back of my head saying, don't fight. So I walked away from a lot of stuff. Consequently, I got bullied a lot. And now it's like I'm starting to see the same behaviors in adults. And I'm like, I don't have to take this from you. And I'm starting to build that bone that I
Yeah.
never had coming up. So I guess that would be one way.
I think one way that it has manifested in me is mistrust. I think I'm over a lot of that mistrust, and this I would just speak with my mom because of some of the trauma. It wasn't even necessarily her fault. It was just the situation that we were in, which caused me to have a lot of mistrust in her and her ability to even parent at one point. Um, so I think that manifested, and I think some of the things that my father did and how he was, and some of the demons that he fought against. I think I wanted to swing the opposite direction and be nothing like that. Um, and it wasn't until I was in my later 30s and stuff when I started having an understanding about what being a man is and what manship or manhood is all about. Was I was a That's when I was able to recognize the good stuff, be able to pull out the good stuff and throw away a lot of the weeds. So I think, because sometimes what happened is you can swing so far the other way because you don't want to be like somebody that you can destroy a lot of relationships and stuff like that, in the path, going that direction. So I know I probably destroyed some relationships. I probably picked up some nasty habits from my dad, just good, bad, or indifferent. It's just that, if you see it on a regular basis, you it can become part of your life. You know what I mean? So, and some of those may have just been behaviors, or even condescending behaviors, or just certain things that he would do. um I found myself even now, so doing some of those things and having to try to combat against those. So yeah, man, that's that's how some of it has manifested in my life so far.
Yeah, and thank you guys for sharing that. And it's amazing how even though we grew up in four different areas of the world, right, and have different experiences, but it also seemed that how our experiences all seem to interconnect in some way. And again, thank you for sharing your experiences in the chat. I greatly appreciate that. Liz, welcome to the show. Great to see you. Also, a fellow John Maxweller. And as you can see, again, shared experience, right? She grew up without her biological father and saw her mother abused by her father. Sounds very similar to the exact same story that I just told. And you'll be surprised how common this was, especially in those years, right? Those younger years. You'll be surprised how common of a thing that was. And let's just be honest. Some parents separated, but some parents fought through it and stayed together. So some existed in that type of abusive relationship and continue. So imagine those children who stayed there and witnessed this on a continual basis, and then try to fight through the idea of what a healthy relationship looked like into their adult years. So Liz, thank you for sharing that. Queen V, good to see you. Always great to see you on the show. Let me see my man Leverett, good to see you. Miss Charlotte Jordan, always good to see you. Why she smiling, y'all? You see him, right?
I
Cassandra
just hit
said,
her up too.
did you?
Just hit her up in the chat.
Just for you guys don't know, Miss Charlotte Jordan is Uncle Junior's mother. It is always a pleasure to have her on the show. Watching a loved one commit suicide, oh my God, as a child was tough. That kind of made me always keep a wall up to limit how deep to allow a person into my life. It played with my trust.
That's a
That's
thing.
man,
That is a thing.
that
I hear
is.
that a lot, and I cross that path too. That is a
Yeah,
thing. That is a thing. Sometimes we sit and we're like, you know what? It would be cool if all of this was just over, and I ain't
yeah,
had to deal with this nonsense no more. That's a
yeah,
thought, man. That's a legitimate thought that a lot of people don't take into consideration. They really
yeah,
don't.
And a lot of people don't take it into consideration, especially with people like myself who has battled thoughts like that, because I'm the jovial person. I'm always comedic. I'm always making people smile. But on the inside, I was dying. On the inside, I was hurting. But the way that I would deal with it was to show that I was happy. And in reality, I was far from.
yeah,
It's like
Boy,
a
yeah,
that was me.
facade.
Yeah.
It's a facade you got to constantly put up every day,
I don't
and
know if
that's
this
what's
is
scary.
childhood. I don't know if this is childhood trauma, but it was to me. And it wasn't, it was just the nature of the beast. When you didn't have a lot of stuff,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like shoes and clothes. Like we used to go to the Goodwill, you know what I mean? Like mom, Charlotte was always at the Goodwill. She still is. But you know what? So am I. I got pictures and everything in my house that I got from the Goodwill. You know what I mean? So I see the purpose. That's how, that what I'm getting ready to say is like there was some childhood trauma there for me because like I would get bullied and like I would go to school knowing that I had on clothes from the Goodwill. You know what I mean? And like and it was because my dad had it was six of us and my dad had, some demons and stuff that he was dealing with. So the money that was coming in wasn't always coming to us. And at the same time, I didn't know where the money was coming from. I was a kid anyway. You know what I mean? But like just not having clothes and shoes and stuff like that that caused me to get pick on and different things like that, you know. So like now, that's why I got part of the reason why I probably got all them tennis shoes over there. You know what I'm saying?
See, growing up, I was like that, where my grandmother,
You
she
had
footed the bill.
everything?
My grandmother, we
Oh,
ain't had nothing. My grandmother
yeah.
footed the bill for everything, and we had this store called Purple Heart. It was like the Goodwill where you go. It was a thrift store where you go and purchase items for 25 cents, 10 cents, clothing. But during this holiday seasons, they would give these boxes out. The boxes had underwear, socks, but they would always have like a shirt. But when you went to school and wore that shirt, everybody knew you got that free box
Mm,
because you had that shirt on. Because everybody they'd be like, I ain't wearing that shirt. But you didn't. When I didn't know, I show up with that shirt on, and then like you say, you get bullied and all this other stuff,
yeah.
and you either punch back or you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that too. I went
Well, we
Hey,
just,
Charlotte, I tell y'all a story about Charlotte after the show.
hey man, leave moms alone. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Hey, it's a good one. It's a good one. Hey, look, Charlotte won't let me get beat up. I'm gonna tell you that. I came
Hey,
on one time. Charlotte was like, "Hey, let's go." Me and her march down the street. I ain't gonna
well,
say what happened after that. I ain't gonna put her out there. I tell you after the
You
show,
say Charlotte Ann, Miss Charlotte Ann was singing "Knuck If You Buck."
Oh
bro.
look at man,
shoot.
cut it out, cut
Bro,
it out. Listen, continue forward.
she
Antoine
saved,
Lyons,
sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost now,
that's
though.
it. That's it. Antoine Lyons, good to see you, brother. Welcome to the show. Hey, so Michelle Ray said my brother struggled with life, and I witnessed him wanting to end it. My mom and myself, it has been hard, but we're all still here and we're better. Myself had a great friend to help me, and that's an awesome testimony. And thank you for sharing that. But again, it's just going through that phase, like knowing that someone is contemplating or thinking about ending it all, like like Chris said, and then wanting to be there for that person, wanting to help that person. So, thank you for sharing that. My main man, Leverett, said he grew up in a two-parent household. However, my father wasn't involved. It often infuriated me when people praised the fact that my dad was there, but we never bonded. And again, it's a consistent story, right? And so it just goes back to what I said in the beginning. It is amazing how many of us have some of these traumas that we have. I don't know. Maybe we have mastered. Maybe we compartmentalized it. Maybe some of us have actually dealt with it and moved on, but this is a consistent story that's in our community. And I think as we progress in this conversation, you're going to see how that manifests itself going forward. Let's see. Liz is still adding value. I grew up in the struggle and I am so honored and grateful to have grown up that way. Reason is because it made me who I am today, and I appreciate the little things. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. It's those things have a way of sharpening us, but we have to grow from it. We have to heal from the pain that exists. So thank you for sharing that. Sherry Sweet asked an amazing question. And Sherry, if you don't mind, I want to get there, but I think we have some talking points that's going to get there. So I haven't. I don't want you to think I'm not going to answer. We're really going to answer that question. Scott Williams, welcome to the show, my friend. Good to see you again. Scott is a good friend of Mr. Garfield Martin and co-worker, so it's always good to see him. So man, you guys are already adding value, and I greatly appreciate that. Keep putting them in the chat, and we're going to keep bringing them to the panel. All right. So now that we've done our reflection, and we're going to kind of dive into it now to set the conditions. And again, like I said, some of the stuff is going to be uncomfortable. I'm gonna bring up a point, and I am going to read a snippet, and then I'm gonna turn it over to these gentlemen to ask a question. So, childhood trauma will manifest itself in a couple of different ways. So, first, it will make you more pessimistic. People who have experienced a traumatic event, especially when they were younger, are more likely to be pessimistic. They often generalize their traumatic experience into a generalized negative expectation of the world that makes it more difficult for them to see the positive side of things or trust that good things will happen. Rather, they internalize their unhealed trauma until it manifests as either self-blame, passive helplessness, or a pessimistic worldview. So, with that being said, gentlemen, my question to you is: how has the pessimistic worldview interrupt the progressive society, in your opinions?
It's like everybody looks for the worst in each other.
Mm,
Everybody automatically looks for the bad thing to happen because they're so used to the bad thing happening. It's like
mm,
breaking a habit. Like A lot of people don't. A lot of us. A lot of us are so used to our trauma that we think is normal.
Mm.
And when somebody tries to bring us out of that trauma, it looks different and it's scary. And then we go back into our trauma because that's where we're comfortable. But it's trauma. So I guess that's where I would start.
Yeah.
That's where I
And
would start.
I think to add on to that, being from the inner city, everybody around you are going through the same traumas. So it's normalized, as Chris said. And so when I didn't see it as trauma, I didn't see it as negative until I got away. Because before I could blame, well, the white man keeping me down and not yada, yada, yada. I could blame everybody else. But then when I got out, I was like, man, I'm looking at the mindset because eventually in order to grow, you have to have a mindset change. You have to look at yourself better than you were. And it's like, it's almost I was speaking with my daughter and we were talking about the question last week. And she said, no, you put yourself in a situation to where I didn't have to experience what you went through. So I started out ahead, and hopefully my children will be even further. And I was like, exactly, because you don't want your children to go through the same traumas that you've gone through. But we sometimes bring that over as baggage and say, well, it was good for me, so it's good for you. Like with like I'm talking spanking where you beating the brakes off, where it was extension cords and race car tracks and stuff like that. It's like that's not a whooping, that's abuse. But since that's the learned behavior that we grew up with, we tend to do what we know. And then it hinders the child's mind for that generation and the next until they change.
Mm. I think for me, when it comes down to this question, I think the pessimistic worldview denies a person from having hope in what could possibly be. Right? You don't get the opportunity to imagine a world free of the trauma that you existed in. And unfortunately, like Chris said previously, that's what you're stuck in. That's what you know. And because that's what you don't know anything outside of that. I think Roland gave a perfect example last week. And if you haven't seen last week's episode, I invite you to go back and take a look at it because that's the conversation that kind of catapulted us into this victim blaming. I think Roland mentioned last week, like in your environment, in your community, all you see is certain things. And I think you gave the same example that you gave this morning. I mean, not this morning, that you gave earlier in relation to living in the inner city, seeing, people on the street carrying guns, things of that nature. And so he said that he was intentional about getting his children outside of the neighborhood, seeing different things, experiencing, having different experiences. And I think that's probably one of the best things that I did when I joined the Army. The Army got me outside of my environment to see different things, going to experiencing church on a different level, experiencing people who talk different, who believe different, and who actually believed in me at a level that I never experienced before. And this is no disrespect to anybody I grew up with or anybody I've seen in my neighborhood. But again, the different experiences kind of helped me to see something different. So the pessimistic worldview kind of diminishes your idea of hope. So as we are progressing, no, you good, man. I told you we ain't gonna do that. We good.
It'd be me, right? It'd be me.
It's all good. Let me see. Liz says that your trauma is your world. It's kind of difficult to understand the good life if you've never really had an example of such. As an adult, I've had to learn to grow and create my own health life. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. Go ahead, bro.
And that's like being in the military. When you go back home to the inner city, everybody think you rich. Everybody think you made it. Everybody think you got it all together. So I had a chance to get stationed an hour away from Detroit. I was in Lansing. Lansing was country to me. Lansing was like here. And so when I took my little cousins up there, they the same age as my kids. they acting like they in heaven, and they're running around and seeing things. And at one point I wanted to kill him because one of my little cousins, we at the park, and they chasing down the doggone geese. And they talking about my granddaddy Rick can cook that. I'm like, can't take you nowhere. No, but you have to expose people, children, to various things so that they see that, man, it's more than my surroundings. Because if it's not, if they don't see it, they'll live in that same 10 block area.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think ideally, because I know I mentioned hope, but it's also, I think, Roland, you mentioned the idea of the man holding us down. So if that's the thing that's injected in me at such a young age, then that's going to be the thing that restrict me from moving forward. That's going to limit. It'll be what we would call a limiting belief system. It limits my progression because I don't believe I can go beyond that because I am always looking for someone to hold me down, not realizing that the man is that person that's in between your two ears. So I think this is an important thing to consider, especially when we look at the trauma that we've been through, right? The trauma that we've been through, it literally limits us. It puts us in kind of like a silo to where we don't want to reach outside of everything because we found a way to create some sort of comfort zone in it. Um, so absolutely. Let me see. Miss Queen V is still adding value. I never gave up. I believe that there was a silver lining, that it would not be like that forever. And you gotta go back and see what she said earlier. And I'm glad she said that. She said her childhood trauma was watching her father beat her
She
mother, and she could
is
not do anything about it. So again, the continual cycle of just conditioning and behavior. It's a very scary thing, and I am so glad. Um, Go ahead.
I just don't understand that. The whole the whole DV thing. I just never understood it. Like, how could you do that to somebody that you claim you love? Like, really? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive. I just never understood it.
No, you're not naive, sir.
Right.
Um, I want to say here. I think Uncle Junior mom kind of, there it is. Growing up in a foster home and being abused and didn't see love and wasn't shown love. So you brought a very good point. How can you do that to somebody you love? But what if that's what you believe love was growing up? And then I got it. It doesn't make sense.
I'm trying. I'm really trying because I'm slowly coming out of mine because a lot of mine just, when I broke it down to the lowest common denominator and pulled myself out of it, it just didn't make sense. So I'm pulling myself out of all of the ones that I just don't understand and that just don't make sense to me. And I'm dealing with the real ones that I face all the time. But that one, love through violence, I just never understood it.
Yeah.
I think when you love, as you say, through violence or whatever, it's a form of control. And when you can't control something, especially that's why you mostly see it with male on female. When, or I got to buck up, I got to show I'm bigger than you and tougher than you because I want to make you do what I want you to do. So now I usurp any authority you have, and I hover over you. That's why even talking to kids or whatever, you got to buck up and you got to get bigger than, instead of, because you don't know, one, you don't know how to communicate, and you don't know how to accept that it's not necessarily about you. It's about some type of communication. And if you could have just communicated it better, you may have gotten your way. But since you don't understand the purpose of the other person, now you just gonna demean them and treat them in a bad fashion.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
And
what we
see,
talk about. It's what I talk about with elementary kids. They don't know how to use their words, right? That's what we tell kindergartners, use your words, because they haven't learned how to really construct a criticism and debate and have a conversation with another kindergarten about the crayons. So they throw and they hit You know what I mean? Because they don't know how to use their words. And that's the same thing. Like what Roland, what we're talking about with the DV, that's just the action behind whatever else is already going on the inside. They either can't communicate. And I'm gonna tell you all the time, like to Roland's point, it's not even it's the other side of that too. There are also some women out there who will challenge a man because they know that they have 911, all these different things to protect them. They can go call their 10 brothers and stuff like that. So they know that, so they will use that to get in a man's face. And then, sometimes men, when we're challenged, sometimes that can be the result. Because during that moment, said person may not think about the 10 brothers or everything else. At that moment, they're thinking about this person is in my face with a finger and they're challenging me.
Yeah.
So they have disrespected you, and I'm just going the other side of, what Roland was talking about, because it's both sides.
I've been that guy too. I've
hmm
been that guy that thought that taking abuse from a woman was normal until I stopped taking it.
Mm,
hmm
mm.
And then you notice we talking, a lot of times we just talk the physical abuse. A lot of times we don't like to talk about the verbal abuse that happens before the physical abuse happens.
Oh yeah. And when
But
I
that's
when I
another
said
whole
abuse, I meant
conversation.
the when I said abuse, I meant the whole thing. Like getting
hmm
talked to crazy, getting
Yeah.
hands put on me and all of that. And then once I stood up for myself, that's why I'm saying I'm starting to have to stand up for myself. Now it's like I asked for courage and the divine creator said, I'm gonna show you you already got it. And I'm gonna put you in every situation that I can to show you that you got it.
Mm. That's good. That's really good. I
Make
like
sure you
that.
keep it tame, brother. You don't want to swing too far to the other side either.
That's
Good
that's what I'm
point.
that's what I'm saying. Like it's
Control the courage. Controlled courage. Because I went through the same thing. I was the little guy growing up. You know what I mean? I was in 6th grade, and there were kindergartners that were taller than me. You know what I mean?
Kindergarten.
It's 5th grade girls that's taller than me at school right now.
Don't laugh at them, y'all.
Hey, it is
oh
what
no,
it
I'm
is.
not nah,
Look,
because
hey, look, 2 years, like 3 years ago, there was like 3 5th grade girls that was like 5'8", 5'9".
sheesh.
Sheesh. Exactly. Like I'm only 5'7" on a good day. I had back surgery.
That's with the shoes.
No, here we
With the
go.
shoes,
See,
yeah.
here we go. All right, moving forward. I got to stop before they get started. All right, moving forward. Again, I want to make sure that I'm honoring everybody in the chat. And I see what you're putting down there, and trust me, we're going to get to them as well. Forgive me because I can't get to everything because I don't want to lose sight of what these gentlemen are saying. But you guys are adding so much value. Keep adding. For everybody else, by all means, go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and hit the like button as well. You know what I'm saying? Hit the like, give us a few hearts. Because again, this is a heavy lift. And like I said, if you know anybody who can benefit from this conversation, share it with them and get them involved. Again, we would love to hear your comments. We would love to get your perspective on some of these talking points. Now, the next point we're going to dive into is that childhood trauma makes you feel alone. Childhood trauma is known to increase a person's likelihood of developing depression and anxiety, as well as making them more vulnerable to feelings of guilt and shame. This negative self view then makes victims more socially withdrawn and, as a result, suffer from lower levels of social and emotional support and poorer quality interpersonal relationships. With that being said, gentlemen, how has suffering from lower levels of social and emotional support and poor quality interpersonal relationship disrupt the family unit?
Hmm.
Ooh. I'll have to defer to y'all because you've been in family units and you have your own family unit. I don't.
Are we talking family that we grew up with? Family?
Either or, families you grew
Okay.
up with, families that you're a part of. Either or.
Oh, if we're talking about how we came up, then okay.
Yeah. Because I think when I was growing up, it was I was like, screw everybody. It's me and my sister. Why? Because both parents were crazy. They doing whatever, and they are the ones inflicting whatever. So in my eyes, I ain't got to worry about nobody but her. I got to protect her. And when I did get put out the house at an early age, 14, it was because I came into the house and my mother was whooping my sister, or she had whooped her. She had this white extension cord in her hand, and so she wasn't doing it then. She said something to me, and I kind of like shrugged it off, and I was walking away, and she hit me in the back. And I would it was it wasn't that the thing hurt so much. It was that what I was going through with her and her demon, as we gonna call it, what I was going through with that hurt me. And so
Mm.
I said some choice words and came back with some. And so it was time for me to go right then. I knew it was because it was a toxic environment. And when I left, it was a guilt. Even when I joined the military, it was a guilt because I could no longer protect my sister because I had to protect her from them.
Yeah, I like it. I'll jump in on this one as well. Because I like the fact that Roland brought to the conversation that he found a bond with his sister and he felt like he needed to protect her. I think also because we kind of talked about what families look like in years ago, right? You had the dominant male in the house who felt like he had the rule with an iron fist, and in some cases you had a passive woman, but in other cases you may have had a woman who refused to be passive as well. And so what you have is, unfortunately, in some cases, that family unit will break up, and then the mother and the child will go back to her mother. And unfortunately, the dynamics that were created ran the mother away in the first place because she was trying to get away from mom, but had to go back. So now what you're experiencing is a family dynamic that's disjointed. You have people who are living in the same house. Mom may not necessarily get along with her sister, which is your aunt, right? So you're seeing that. So now you have disassociation within the household. You have people who are literally back, they're bickering amongst one another. They're deceitful towards one another. They're taking things from each other. So you're not seeing a healthy family dynamic. You're seeing a family dynamic to where you almost look like strangers living in a boarding home, right? You're like, if you took a step back, it doesn't even look like it's your family, or it should be your family, because you don't necessarily have that connection. I like to talk about, when it comes down to relationships, I like to talk about intimacy. Well, when you go back and you look at some of those relationships that suffered from lower levels of social and emotional support, there is no intimacy because they feel like they have to protect themselves from one another. And it doesn't feel good, especially for a child, to be raised in a home where you feel like you have to protect yourself from certain people that's in your family. And that's a very, very disheartening thing. And then fast forward, as that child now becomes an adult, how does that child know how to create an environment where intimacy is welcome, or even stimulate intimacy on their own? So that's just kind of like my perspective. I can talk about that because I lived it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going to speak to feeling alone. Everything you described, Roland, I'm doing now. I'm removing myself from all of that. Well, I did it. I started like 10 years ago, but I'm removing myself from all of that. You said you got removed from the home at the early age. I'm trying to sever the disconnect between how I lived then and how I am supposed to go on into the future. And it's caused me to isolate myself from all of them. And it's also difficult for me to trust. Like, if I can't trust the woman that brought me into this world because the man that helped create me isn't there, if I can't trust you, how am I supposed to trust anybody else? And I'm supposed to trust you with everything. It's difficult. It's like I said, man, it's like tearing off an arm because you've been doing this for so long. Seeing something different is scary. But sometimes you have to isolate yourself to understand that, one, there's another way to think, and two, to figure out who you are, like at an adult age. And that's not something that we've been taught. So sometimes isolation is a good thing, but sometimes you can get so deep in your isolation that you forget that you also need people. You
That's
understand
good.
what I'm saying? So I'll just leave it at that, because that's where I am right now. Like, do you know how if Garfield would have never reached out to me, I don't think we would have been in contact, because I don't know how to reach out to people. You understand what I'm saying? It's like the olive branch has to be extended, and then we go from there, because it's difficult for me to trust. But he brought me in, and now I'm a part of this. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm learning that sometimes trusting people is a good thing, because now I'm surrounded by men, and men from different sides and different perspectives. You understand what I'm saying? But it's difficult to reach out because it's difficult to trust. So I'll just leave it at that.
I want to speak to the alone piece too. Remember back in the day before we had cell phones, there was this thing called 1-800 call ATT, right? You had to call people collect in order to talk to them. This was in the 90s. During the 90s, after I left home, I'm only going to speak on it because my mom already kind of sort of brought it up. You know, you read the comments. My mom grew up in foster home. She had abusive. So my mom didn't have it to give to me. So there was a lot of growing up and um, early adult life having thoughts of being alone. And then some of the things that caused issues between me and my mom, which was more me not speaking on it as a young man, was the fact I remember one time, like she went out of town. I'm throwing under the bus right now, but she still loved me. Like she was going to remember Color Purple was touring years ago. It was like, you know, she was going to see Color Purple, but she wouldn't come and visit me. And I felt some kind of way about that, you know. But you know, fast forward to now, you see my mom's on the show. So you know, because of the trauma and you know the lower levels of social emotional support that we had growing up, that caused me um and like I said, you know, my mom said it before, like she didn't have it, so that also allowed me to be more forgiving as I got older and stop putting the blame on her. It's like I can't blame my mom for not giving me what she didn't have, but she has it now, and you can see it now. Like my mom sent me a long text yesterday, whole bunch of accountability. And I tell my mom right now, Mom, you good, man, you straight here, live in front of millions and millions of people who gonna see this video. We straight. All right. I
Nice.
don't got nothing against you. Like we good, Mom, 100%. So I love my mom. And I will say, like I said, we grew up a certain way. We did grow up in the church and stuff like this, but however, there were certain things that my mom just didn't have, so she couldn't give me. Um, and that's just part of it. I don't know where I was going with this, man, but I'm done.
No, you good, man. You good.
Nice.
You good. I love it. And listen, man, I just want to again extend a shout out to everybody in the chat, man. They are lighting it up. So, man, I just want to just say welcome. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you're not a part of the Empowering Perspective community, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and share it with anybody that you know who can benefit from this amazing conversation. Because we all, I don't care who you are, you've all experienced some type of childhood trauma. And so again, this is a platform, as you can see, where it's a safe conversation where we're talking about it. Like we're exposing some of the things that we've been through, so that we can help the community overall grow. That's the intent, right? We're not trying to embarrass or shame anybody. We're not trying to put anybody on front street. It's all about helping the community come together, because that's ultimately our goal. Brother Sandon, good to see you, man. Welcome to the show. Wendy Rodriguez, welcome to the show. Shaking Nations with Jesus Christ, definitely welcome to the show with a name like that. Absolutely. Um, listen, man, I'm sorry. I get excited when I see certain things. Um, and I just want to make sure I stress, man, I appreciate these gentlemen, because, again, as you can see, we're not holding withholding any punches when it comes down to this. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that a lot of the things that we've been talking about have been like things that happen in our childhood, whether it be with our peers and with our parents. And I want to kind of address the parental piece. This isn't this isn't us attacking our moms and our dads. This isn't it. This is us understanding the situation for what it is and telling how we deal with it or how we're currently dealing with it. You understand what I'm saying? We're not trying to say that our parents were horrible people that did all of these bad things to us. It's just a lot of our situations were screwed up and we had to figure out how to navigate through it, but we don't hold nothing against them.
Absolutely.
So don't
Absolutely.
view it
Hey,
as disrespect just for us bringing this up.
and to add to that, like I'm sure that our children are going to probably experience a certain level of trauma too. You know what I mean? Like, because the three of us up here, we were all in the military, so most of us had probably left our kids for an extended period of time, and we may not know until they're in their 20s and 30s, and they really talk to us how that affected them. So I'm looking forward to having some of those conversations. I am, and I'm not at the same time because I don't actually know all of the causes or all of the effects that me being deployed for all of those times and being in the military and being away. I don't know yet the outcome of how that's going to affect my son. So that's something that if you have kids and you've been in the military, there the the wheel keep turning.
Yeah.
Things come back around. So we going to be on the other side of this, and we may already be on the other side of this trauma conversation right now, and may or may not even know it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Roland. It's on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, because it's like he went to a segue where I was thinking, because I had to check myself over things that I was doing, not maliciously, but I was like, I got gang of grandkids. One of my grandkids, when she came out, she was chunky, so I used to call her Fat Stacks. And then I had to think, hold on, I can't keep calling this baby fat because it's gonna get here in her head. So I just changed it to Stacks, and she don't know where it come from, but it's just Stacks. That's her name for me. But we as parents don't realize the damage that we do to our children with words and certain deeds. Like when I was growing up, one of my grandmothers, she would always like demean me and stuff. It's like she would say things as a little kid. She would say, "Oh yeah, you're a nice looking boy, but you ain't nothing like your daddy was." I'm like, where's this? That's
What does
my
that
daddy. I
mean?
don't
Yeah, what does
care.
that mean?
Right. And see what it was because all of them were like the DeBarge family. They were lighter. I'm not dark by any means. But I'm
The
just,
DeBarge
yeah,
family.
yeah, they were light with the feathered hair and everything,
Like
waved and
Antoine.
yeah.
Get out of my head because that's where I was going.
I didn't want to say it.
But she, she was
Antoine, I hope you're watching.
she experienced a lot of colorism in her day, and she was
Yeah.
half white. So she looked, even though her husband who had passed was my grandfather, he was dark. She had a negative connotation towards dark skinned people. So she was, you've been in the sun too long, and something like that. And she was saying, and those type of things, they get into a kid's head. So it's like, man, I can't, I'm too dark. I'm this, that, and the other. And then that's where the nappy hair and all that, phrases like that I can't stand today when people say it, but that's what people say. Those things are damaging to a child's psyche.
I'm nodding my head because it's true and I lived it. I'm trying to tell you, it was not cool to be dark skinned in the 80s. And listen, man, people like Roland and Garfield, they were always accepted. People like me, I was happy when Wesley Snipes came on the scene. I'm just being honest. Listen, again, welcome to the show. We appreciate you guys
Hey,
joining us on this Friday evening. Wesley Snipes, he paved the way for all the stuff.
man, Wesley Snipes was so black, he used to put fingerprints on charcoal.
See, that's what I'm talking about right there. That's
See,
where we get in. That's where we get into issues right there. Got to be about the dark skin jokes. Listen, welcome to this evening show, and again, we're glad to have you here. Go ahead and share this. Go ahead and like it. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. I mean, go ahead. Give us some love over here, because these gentlemen, they're exposing the raw, honest truth. And again, these are things that have hindered the family unit. These are things that have caused rifts in between families. I like the fact that you brought the military into the conversation. And I got it, Chris. I'm not going to stay here too long, right? I like the fact that you brought the military in the conversation because there's a sacrifice that we made for our families. However, there is also a sacrifice that actually happened to our families as well. It's almost like we sacrificed them for a way of life, especially if you were like me, that average deploying 1 year and being home for another year, deploying the next year and being that causes some concern, that causes some disconnect. And I did that for like 7 years straight. So you have
So
to
you were gone
understand
every other year?
every other year
Yeah.
for 7 years straight. Yes. So you have to understand what type of disconnect that does from the father
Wow.
and their children. You become almost like a stranger. And so again, that's a traumatic event because especially as a young boy, who am I? Who do I have around me on a consistent basis that trains me in the things of manhood, male development? Who's going to train me in that? He's not around, right? And then when he comes around, my son got to find a way to warm back up to me, and then by the time he do that, we're going back to the field. We're prepping for deployment again. And next thing you know, he see me getting my field gear out, packing bags and all that stuff. And now, oh my goodness, he's getting ready to leave again. So there's no need to connect because if I connect, he's just going to leave me again. So again, this is the trauma that we're talking about. It's a recycling of painful experiences that we did to our children. And again, I didn't know. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was taking care of my family. They didn't really want for nothing, but again, I was always gone. So in my mind, I'm providing, and the most important thing I could have provided them with was this guy. That's the key. So again, thank you guys for joining us. And as we press into this conversation, we move into the arena that childhood trauma causes or makes you self-sabotage. Now, a person who's experienced a childhood trauma may be more likely to self sabotage, especially when it comes to their relationships. In fact, studies have shown that a large majority of those who have suffered abuse or violence related to childhood traumas also go on to develop adult attachment disorders. Most of them have a hard time maintaining long term relationships, but be it platonic or romantic, because of how the trauma has distorted their view of human nature. Instead of believing in a person's innate capacity for good, they instead learn to fear their capacity for evil and deceit, which makes them less trusting and more likely to self sabotage, creating problems where there might not be one. In other words, it goes back to what we talked about last week: victim blaming. What are some ways that a person can self sabotage their relationships?
Hmm. When I was in the military and things would get testy at home, or I had to actually be a father, it was too easy for me to say, "Hey, put me on assignment," or send me to this school, or like even my B knock was 4.5 months, so it was like I got to get up out of here. And I didn't say it then, and I will say it now. I was more comfortable being deployed because I knew how to push soldiers. But when I come home, it's like, I'm out of place. I got to go. And so, like, next thing smoking, I'm out.
Mm,
I
mm.
can definitely see that. I remember I was like, man, I'm good. I'm like, I'm working late tonight.
Yeah,
Hey, I'll take your CQ. I'll take your staff duty.
exactly.
Um,
Wow.
Yeah.
bruh, like, and sometimes the self sabotage is stuff that you do to cause even more problems in the relationship. You know, 'cause sometimes when you're going out and you want to be gone, out fishing. So, sometimes you need to get away. Well, that was back then. You know what I'm saying? So, you having demons that you're fighting, and then you're looking to get out, to get away, and then not only are you just being gone, but then while you're gone, you're doing other um bad behavior,
Extracurricular,
huh?
extra
Extra, yeah, extracurricular,
curricular,
extra. Hey, man,
curricular activities.
drink some more water.
We know what you mean, man. We know what you mean.
Yeah, those words,
Doing
right?
extra stuff.
Doing extra stuff, right? Which causes even more problems into the relationship. So, man, there's so many ways a person can self sabotage. Like,
And we don't even see the damage that we do emotionally
yeah,
to the spouse and to the children. Because
yep,
when you're not like with me with growing, I had girls initially earlier. And so when you have these girls, I don't care what they say, they need their daddy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you ain't there, because I was that daddy at the football game, but I had to go there and know the cheers and all that other stuff, because I realized, like, hold up, these my babies, and my girl spent a lot of time with me, and I loved it. And but when it was time to go, it was like, I got to get out of here for my sanity. But I failed to look at what they may be going through. But then they moved in with me, my oldest girls, when they were in their high school years.
Yeah.
You,
It
you,
also, oh,
no, go ahead.
it also, the trauma can affect relationships because like I said, sometimes when you're going through all of that trauma stuff, it causes you to have mistrust. So it's hard for you to trust people. You just like, man, it's like one thing after another. Every little thing, like I don't trust, I don't trust, I don't trust. So it's hard for you to build those relationships with the people. Sometimes it's women, sometimes it's coworkers, sometimes it's peers, whoever. So like I said, it does make it a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult to make relationships and build relationships because you don't trust. You're like, oh man, this person will be gone. And I know I had a lot of that because I'm doing my relationship. It was, every argument, it was like, I'm out. And it's like, man, like even that trauma, it's like you always was ready to go. You know what I mean? It's like, dang, man, it's like, who can I depend on? And at some point in my life, I felt like there was that I didn't have any woman in my life. Like every woman that I loved had like failed me at some point. You know what I mean? I
Mm.
went and talked about my mom. I went and, I was married for 19 years before. You know what I mean? I felt like every woman that I loved in my life is somehow I didn't have a relationship with, or that there was some sort of trauma or something there. I don't know what it was, but it, I'm thinking that it probably has something to do with, that trauma probably has something to do with, my relationships going forward. So,
So you went there. I just continue in that vein. I will be honest with you. I got to the point at one time I would view every woman through the lens of my mother. Like if you wasn't as strong, like I've seen my mother do some amazing things. Like no joke, when my mother had my sister, she went into labor, got in the car, drove herself to the hospital, gave birth, then she walked around the hospital. In 24 hours, she drove herself back home. Right. So it's like when my ex-wife would have her monthly and have the cramps, she'd be in the bed, curl up in the fetal position. I'm like, curl up in the fetal position. Woman, my mama gave birth to a whole child, drove herself to the hospital. You see what I'm saying? That was that I'm just being transparent. That's what I did. Because I'm like, how can you not stomach that? But then my mother did all this. But she did all, and I know it's crazy, but just being
They
honest.
not built the same.
I'm not
They
gonna go
not
there.
built the same. This model is not built like this model.
True, true, but no model is the same. So that's kind of like the idea. And it was wrong for me to compare one to the other. But I was just being honest. I was like, I don't understand how you're struggling with this. And my mother had to deal with all this and still made it work. She found a way to make it work. Now, I want to just kind of inject that, but I want to transition because I think you guys are being nice. So I'll go ahead and breach it. I want to start off with self sabotage as thinking the worst of a person, regardless of whatever they're doing, right? So if you go to the bathroom with your cell phone, then you automatically assume that that person is going to the bathroom with their cell phone because they're having a private conversation with somebody of the opposite sex. So that's the idea of self sabotage, right? You're automatically assuming the work. If, say, for example, you guys talked about being in the military. So if you're working late, why are you working late all of a sudden? You must be out there doing something you ain't got no business doing. Or if she go hangs out with her girls and she stay gone for an extended period of time, and you call her and she don't answer her phone, you're automatically assuming the worst, right? So that's kind of like the idea of some of the self-sabotage that may happen in a relationship as well because of some past traumatic event.
Ooh,
It's
you
like
jumped in there.
I
Go
did.
ahead, Chris.
I honestly believe that we are so tied to our trauma that we have to self-sabotage to feel it every now and then. It's the goofiest thing ever, but sometimes that's a thing. I sometimes do it too. So I understand it. But
Well, Oh, I'm sorry.
Nah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you see that in a lot of people in their relationships where, like, and I can speak for the from the. Well, I can't speak for them, but I see a lot of females who will want the bad guy, the guy who puts them in check or whatever, whatever. And then when they get the good dude, it's like, well, when I just ran over him. No, he's not putting up with your bull crap, and he's allowing you to have your space because you are immature and don't know how to necessarily be in a relationship. So he's giving you time, and you rather have the dude that's gonna snatch you up and put hands on you because you think you've grown to think that that's love. That's
Like
not
that's
love.
normal, and it's like I said, man. I'm coming from all of this. I'm a product of a lot of this, and I'm trying to understand it. And like I said, that and the whole DV thing, those are two things that I just do not understand. If you have somebody in your life that is giving you everything you need, and not necessarily everything you want, but everything that you need, why would you mess that up?
I wish
But
you had that message that
but
right
it's
there.
like
It didn't happen.
But
It
it's
didn't
like I
happen.
see it happen all the time. I see some of the smartest. I see some of the smartest men and some of the smartest women make some of the dumbest dating decisions I've ever seen in my entire life. I just,
Power.
So I think this is the perfect time to answer Sherry Sweet's question. Sherry, I promised you I was going to get back to it. So here we go.
Ooh,
Have any of you dated someone that struggled with childhood trauma? If so, how did you handle it?
I divorced her.
oh shoot.
Well,
No, I'm kidding. It was a good clip though.
I think
oh
what
shoot.
I did, and I don't know if she on here. I don't want to put anything out there, but because she's on here sometime, but and she watches these, but she knows, but she hadn't dealt with some things, and they had come up, and I'm lost as to what's going on. So that changed our whole relationship because she hadn't dealt with it and it just came up and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I'm thinking it's an attack on me. I'm taking it personal, not giving her the space to handle what she needs to handle. And I don't know how to handle it. So neither one of us knew how to handle it. So we decided to go our separate ways.
Hmm.
I just left. I ain't gonna hold you. I just left. I got to the point where I was tired of fighting with my reflection to make her happy.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna fight with you to make you happy. If you want to be miserable, you be miserable over there. I'm gonna go over here. I'm not dealing with that. Not in my adult life. I had to deal with that all through my childhood and all through my late teens, early 20s. You are not about to bring that into my adult life and think that is okay. You go deal with that because I'm dealing with mine. And I can't have you in that space while I'm in my space. It's not going to work. So I just left.
I agree. Same thing. Don't stay. I didn't stay. Um, I think kind of like what just kind of talk about what Roland was saying too. I think that, you know, initially you may not see all of the signs when you're with somebody. However, as you go through the relationship, if a woman or a person is a certain way, you're hoping that with time they may change because you see something in that person. You be like, man, I really like this chick. It's something about her. You know what I mean? And you like, I'm gonna give her time to kind of, I ain't gonna say nothing this time. I kind of let it be because I'm just like, man, I really like her. She like to the core, she probably a really good woman. However, she's dealing with some childhood trauma. So we'll wait and hoping that some of those things get fixed, and we'll a lot of times we'll stay a lot longer than what we should have. So I think in my case, I just I'm done. I would think going forward with whoever asked this question, because you saying dating, my suggestion or just my thoughts are is that people shouldn't be dating if they're not already healed. Me personally, this is everybody think however they want to think, but I'm saying me personally, I don't think that two broke people should start building a life together. I think you just gotta go and get help and get healed, and then you date. But like I said, that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Not only that, don't bring me into your life knowing you have issues. That's selfish.
Yeah, I'm
Go
not trying to
deal
heal
with your
you.
issues. Like, I'm not, no. And I think that's why you see a lot of us as a in general stay in quote unquote struggle relationships. It's kind of like, even though we have our own trauma, we feel like we're obligated to date each other because we look like each other, if that makes any sense. Especially in our community, like, we're obligated to date black women. Black women are, I guess, recently obligated to date black men, and if you go outside of that, then something's wrong with you. So we kind of try to make it work with our reflection, but like I said earlier, a lot of us are just a lot of us are not going to fight you to love you. We're just not going
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, I want to add a little context to what everybody else is saying because I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying. I agree with you 100%. But I think also to the untrained eye, you do not know that a person is struggling with childhood trauma. Like you're in it. Like we made this agreement to be together, and we think that we're on the same sheet of music. And Wendelin, I'm sorry, Wendell. If I mispronounce your name, please don't hold it against me. Wendeley Rodriguez. She took the words out of my mouth. You're unequally yoked because we didn't. You didn't take the time to have the necessary conversation before you got into the relationship. I talked about this. I mean, all the time. Um, so you don't know that a person has deep seated trauma that they're masking because that's really what we do. We mask it and then it comes out in another format. It comes out as rage, it comes out as anger, it comes out as withdrawal, it comes out in all different types of settings. So you are totally unaware. And so, in your state of unawareness, you think, like Roland said, or I think it was Roland, no, Uncle Junior, you think the behavior is directed at me personally. It may have been something I did, but it did not warrant the type of behavior that it created. However, what I would also say is that the relationship, and I say this all the time, the relationship is the training ground, right? This is where two people can grow together if we have the level of patience that it takes to help each other grow. Now, do we have that relationship to where we believe that we catapult each other into the next phase of our life? That's the piece, right? Do we view it that way? Do I view you as a person that actually challenges me to move into the next area of greatness? Do you believe that I'm the person that challenged you to move into the next area of greatness? Or the stubborn exists in our environment, and at the end of the day, this is just who I am, accept me for who I am, right? Because you understand that that's the thing. You hear that a lot. Just accept me for who I am. I'm looking for a person to accept me for who I am. Then you're looking to stay alone. I'm just being honest. And you should stay alone because there's some things that we need to work through individually. That's not a bad thing. Working on yourself before tying yourself to somebody else is not a bad thing. That's really what we should be doing. Then once we tie ourselves to each other, then we need to have the conversation before we do the time, by the way. We need to have the conversation on what this situation looks like. What does progression look like? What is the source document that we're going to root our relationship in? And then let that source document determine what's right and what's wrong, not who's right and who's wrong. When we get to the point about who's right and who's wrong, this is a no-win situation because our experiences are different. And my mother taught me one thing and your parents taught you something totally different. And you ain't going to sit here and tell me that my mama was wrong. Just what it is. But the document can tell me all day long, and I'll believe the document because the document is the source of truth. So, given that question, I think it's a great question. We got to go back and remember when we were in that situation, what did we know? What didn't we know? And the thing that we didn't know was detrimental to the relationship, not the fact that the trauma existed. It was what we didn't know because we didn't know that that person need a safe space to reveal some things to us that most people never gave them in the first place.
I'm glad as you're talking, I'm listening and I'm reading in the chat and everything. And I'm glad you touched on one thing. And I don't, Wendeley Rodriguez, she had said something about being unequally yoked and making decisions and red flags and everything. And I don't think people really understand the yoke portion of it. You know, I don't want to make this that conversation,
Right.
but when you're yoked, you yoke with somebody, one person has to lead the other. It's not a, oh, we go in the same direction thing, but that's what we've always been taught. So I think that because they would yoke a younger bull or ox with an older bull, because the older bull knew how to go fast, how to go slow, how to manage his time and make sure it gets done without wearing himself out. That's what the yoke is for. And when it comes to, I think when it comes to making decisions, no ungodly person will make a godly decision. So when it comes to people making choices before they have a relationship, it's not going to happen. So some of us got married at 18, 21, 23. You might have gone to church, but you didn't have a relationship. So
Right.
because I was going to church, but I was going to church to look at skirts. I was going to church
Mm.
because, such and such is going to pass out and her dress might come up as a little kid, so that's just a habitual thing that we learn in our culture. Go to church, and then as you go, you find something you like to do, and it just so happened to be the opposite sex, and that's a reality. And I think sometimes we think because people, oh, he's a good one, he going to church. He ain't going to church looking for you. And then we, like she said, you overlook those. Some people overlook those red flags that they have because, oh, well, he want to do this. Well, that's not really within the realm of what my God says I should be doing. But he say he loved me. Negro don't love you. He just wants some. And but we won't tell that reality. That's why you got to tell your daughters that reality. You got to tell your sons the reality of some things, and that way they won't be damaged adults and have church hurts and live through that, and then say it's the church or it's the people because they've been hurt by the people that are supposed to protect and guide
Hmm. And I want to
That's
touch on that
deep.
relationship. I want to touch on that relationship that he talked about because I think that's important to understand as well, right? The relationship that he made mention of is not a relationship with somebody of the opposite sex. It's a relationship with my creator.
them. Right.
Because what I need to understand is that the love that everybody likes to talk about, that's a whole nother conversation, right? But the love that everybody likes to talk about comes from him. He is it. He is love. So it has to come from him to me, through me to another person. That's the only way it works. When I do it void of him, it's not love. It becomes something that looks more like manipulation. And so now, in the state of manipulation, it's what I want you to do to serve me. That's what the whole Valentine's Day and all this other stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with love comes in at, right? So you have to do in order for me to believe. No, you don't. That has absolutely nothing to do with love. You don't have to do anything for me to love you. It's a commandment. I'm commanded to love you. So I need to learn what that looks like. So in order for me to get there, I have to have the relationship with my creator. She has to have the relationship with her creator. Now, what you now understand is that there is a cohesive understanding that this love that exists did not come from my mom, did not come from my dad. It wasn't taught growing up. I didn't learn it in school. It doesn't happen on February 14th, and it surely doesn't happen on December 25th. It's something that goes beyond your physical capability to understand. And that's really what it is. And I want to kind of bring her second question on because it's a continuation. Once you recognize there's a problem, do you work together through it or do you just give up?
I think it depends on what stage of the relationship that you're in, and how far you've gone. I think if you're married, it's a little bit different conversation than if you're single. There's no kids in the conversation. No kids involved. It's a different conversation. I think just this a little bit, I think and you gotta look at, is the problem worth working through? You know, so
I think as a now mature person, before I'm like, hey, kick rocks. But as a
Mm-hmm.
mature person, I look at it differently because I say I exhaust all options. Me. If the relationship is valuable to me, I'm going to exhaust all options. I'm going to make every effort because I always say when it comes to a family structure, when you sever the relationship, when you cut it, you bleed on the children. So I see things now in my children where if we would have worked it out, or and I'm not saying we'll stay together for the kids. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you sever the relationship, that's what happens. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Hey, no problem. I wish you well. Go on and be well over there. That's no problem because you don't want to be together and strangling each other and things like that. But I'm saying that you know your mate, you know yourself, and if you're in a mature position and you've exhausted everything, and that person's not trying to move forward, this, that, and other, you already know it's time to go.
Yeah.
It's time to go before something happens.
Yeah, I think both people need to be willing to work through it too. Like
Exactly.
both people got to play ball. You can't play
Right.
can't play by yourself.
Yeah.
I'm
I
glad you
will.
said that because I'm going to speak as a man who's single and childless. Like I said earlier, I'm not going to fight you to love you. I'm not going to do it. So if the trauma that you're going through is manifesting in my relationship and you're viewing me and you're viewing me through the lens of your trauma, even though I'm not doing anything to even have that to be a thought in your mind, and I constantly have to remind you, I'm leaving you because obviously you have issues bigger than me. And it's selfish of me to stay in that kind of relationship knowing you aren't ready for it.
I want to kind of piggyback off of that because I look at it in the same way, but I package it just a little different. I will fight everything in the world for you. I just won't fight you for you.
Hmm.
That's the key. So as long as you're working with me, I will extend the patience necessary, but the effort has to be there, right? However, once I understand that the effort is not there and you have now taken my patience for granted and it has become a thing of expectation, now we need to go to the table and have a conversation so we can understand what's happening at this particular point in time. So I think the answer to your question is once you recognize that there's a problem, do you work through it? Yes, as long as we work through it. That's the key. If we are working through it, then we keep working. But once I'm working through it and you decided to stop and stay in it, then I'm doing all the work and you just hanging out and enjoying the fruits of my labor. Then we got to come back to the table and say, okay, what are we doing? Do we need to kind of call it quits? Are you good where you are? Or, so what does that look like? Because I can't exhaust all of my patience there. My patience has to be, it has to be re-energized. I need a reinstatement constantly. So I can't exhaust it all in that one spot, but I'm willing to extend it and keep extending it as long as you're chugging along. As long as we keep moving, I'm okay with that. But I can't exhaust it all in one spot because if we do that, then you're going to bleed me dry. And at this point, I become kind of like hardened when it comes down to everybody else. And I'm called to do a particular thing. We are called to do a particular thing, whether we do it together, whether we do it in the same, vein under one vision. We don't necessarily have to do the exact same thing, but we are called. So our patience really are supposed to be for those people who are curious about the lifestyle that we live. Right. That's where the patients are because we're supposed to take our time, talk with them, teach them, guide them in the right direction so that they can lean on the Father, so that they can lean on the Spirit Himself. But I can't exhaust all my patience in one spot because when I do, I become totally exhausted and I'm sucked dry. So great question. And thank you for asking that. Liz, I see you. And I had to keep hold of your question because I didn't want to lose it. What about when one gets in a severe accident and you get your settlement and your significant other takes your settlement and you're not even married? Is that a trust? Is that person trustworthy? Asking for a friend. Gentlemen, eat.
I'm gonna mute my mic. I just want Chris I want to see what Chris got to say. Mute. Muting.
What about when one gets in a severe accident and you get your settlement money and your significant other takes your settlement money and you're not even married? Why would you take somebody that you're not married? Why would you let somebody you're not married to take money that don't belong to them?
Why would they have access to it?
Yeah, that's not even legal. That's you being stupid. Why would you do that?
And the relationship isn't, you know, it's a separate relationship from the get go. Significant other.
Yeah, you
I
talking
had my
significant
barber used
other.
to be my significant other if it's like that. Not in that fashion, but it's somebody that come and go. If you can come and go without any repercussions, you shouldn't have access to my income like that.
Why exactly? Like why did your quote unquote friend give the significant other husband expectations? Why did she do that? Did she
Husband
have a ring
benefits.
on her finger? Did he
Husband
get down on
benefits.
one knee? Did he do any of those things to let you know that that spot was secured for you? Did any of that happen? Or were you just going by how you thought you felt in that movie that starred you and you played everybody in the movie? I'm
Takes your
sorry.
settlement. Takes. That mean it wasn't given freely.
That's
I mean they
stealing.
stole it.
Yeah.
So that person is not trustworthy, in my opinion.
Well, if you put it like that, then yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But
You
again,
still gave them access to still be able
that's
to
what I'm
take it because if
saying.
somebody if there's a settlement, I guarantee there's Social Security numbers involved, wet signatures involved. I'm pretty sure it's it ain't just you
Yeah,
know
I need more information.
yeah
How
it's
did this person
yeah
get access to
Yeah,
this?
and
Because if this
listen,
access was freely given, then your friend is the dumb one. I'm sorry.
that part too.
Well, she was blinded by love.
Man, listen,
Yeah.
ignorance is not an excuse, and ignorance does not absolve you of accountability. That was dumb.
all
That
right,
was
gents,
stupid.
we're not going to be judgmental, gentlemen. We're not going to be judgmental. Listen,
I'm
I want
sorry.
to,
Clean us
I,
up.
I want to keep moving, right? Check it out. We're getting close, but I want to make sure that we answer this question because I think this question is a very important one. And I think when you go back and look at the context of the entire conversation, we would be remiss if we don't bring a question like this to the table. So the question is, after all these years, what would you suggest the first step to healing from my childhood trauma? Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Your hands up.
I'll go first then. After all these years, what would you suggest the first step to healing from my childhood trauma? Um, the first step is to recognize it. Um, to recognize it. And even if you don't recognize it, even if you recognize that something is a little off, if you're like, man, something just ain't right, man. I don't know why I'm having these feelings of this or this or this. If something just kind of seems off in your life, then maybe go do get some counseling and some therapy, and maybe they can pull out some trauma that you may not have recognized, and then you can deal with it. But like I said, I think the first thing to do when it comes to dealing with childhood trauma is to recognize that you actually have some trauma.
And I just, continue on what you're saying. Definitely recognize it. But most childhood traumas have, at a minimum, two parties. You can only do so much on your own. If you have a chance to communicate that, how you felt and whatever the trauma is with the other person, and it be that, to me, that's invaluable. That's one of those things where me and my mom had to have a conversation before we could have a relationship as I grew up. I mean, and I was already grown in the military, kids and everything, but I wasn't stepping foot in her house. I wasn't talking to her and everything. So it was one of those things where you have to have a conversation about, hey, this is what hurt me, what you did hurt me, how it affected me. And you got to be able to get it out without them trying to explain it away, without them trying to say anything. You got to get it out. And then you can allow them to say where they were, because I always say people are dealing with their own demons even while they're hurting you. So when they hurt you, it's not necessarily that they were meaning to hurt you, it's that they were going through their own ordeals also. So whether it's an excuse or not, everybody has problems. So speaking with the individuals that were that partook in the said uh, traumas.
I will. I agree. By the way, I would say the first step is that recognize that you need help. I can't fix a problem that existed in my life for so many years, and not knowing how to fix it. If I don't know how to fix a thing, it's impossible for me to fix it. It's like we believe we can go to a YouTube video and a YouTube video can give me snippets of things and then I just practice that. No, it doesn't work that way. Recognize that you need help. After recognize that you need help, find someone who has the ability to help you, right? Find somebody who has the ability to that you can actually talk with. That person has not only the training to help you, but also have the desires. Two totally different things, right? I'm sure everybody has gone to a car lot and found out that the car salesman could care less about them. They just want to get the sale. I think the exact same thing happens within this space. I think Sherry put up in there, I think it was Sherry, she mentioned counseling. I'm just being transparent, and I hate to say it. Everybody don't care whether or not you get fixed. They want your money. You
I'm
need
glad you said it because I was gonna go there.
you need to understand why that whether or not that person has the level of compassion that actually wants to build the bridge with you. Are they trying to connect with you? Do they have an understanding of the healing power that actually exists and where that healing power come from? Or are they super arrogant and lean on the number of degrees that they got sitting up on the wall and believe that those degrees is the gateway to your healing? So you need to understand all these things. Don't believe just because a person knows something you have to hire them. You do not. Let's be completely honest. The conversation is a two-way interview. Do I want to take on your level of trauma? Do you want me to take on this level of knowing your personal business? That's what you have to get to the point of understanding. Once you get there, then go to the table. Finally, after you make the decision, go to the table and be blatantly honest. I have a philosophy, right? You have to learn to be radically transparent and radically open-minded. That person is going to ask you about some things that may trigger you. It's okay. Cry it out. I'm just being completely transparent. Cry it out. Don't be afraid to cry. Cry, cry, and then cry some more. That person should give you the time and the space to cry as long as you need to cry. It's necessary for purging whatever's inside you at that particular point in time. In doing so, once you get to the point that you can honestly talk without crying, now you're starting the healing process. You're not finished it yet, right? Because you got to realize this is years and years and years of packed up dirt. I was just sharing with the fellas the other night. It took me some years before I could even talk about my soldier that got killed in Iraq without crying. But now I can talk about it to such a degree that I can tell you that, I miss him. I hate that he passed away, but it was a thing. And so now I can be honest and transparent. Wonderful young man. So that's what I'm talking about. Give yourself time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was the healthy version of yourself. So when we get to that point, be totally transparent. Now, if it involves somebody else, now you can go talk to that other person. Don't make the mistake and talk to that other person first without being healed. Because if you do, you're going to get into a spat. You're going to blame them. You're going to accuse them. You're going to try to hold them accountable. You're going to want them to accept accountability, not even knowing that they haven't gotten to the point to heal themselves yet. So you're automatically making the assumption that they should take responsibility of a thing that they don't even believe that they're responsible for. So all of this is important to understand. I know I gave you a number of different steps, but I needed to say that because I think if we don't do these things in the right direction, you regress. If you go talk to a person at the wrong time, you regress. You build up a wall. You isolate yourself from that person, even if that person is your family member. I want to be completely transparent. Once you get to the point that you can talk about a thing to such a degree that you are not crying anymore, now go talk to that other person. And then what you have to do, you have to go talk to that other person with forgiveness already in your heart. Because if you go with contempt, you're going to put them on trial. Listen, there is no judge and jury. I can't stress that piece enough. I don't care what anybody has ever done to you. You are not the judge and you are not the jury. So you need to go to that person with forgiveness in your heart already, forgiving them before they even fix their mind to ask for forgiveness. That's how you know that you're healed. So I know it was a lot. I apologize. But again, I have to say it in that order, because when we get it out of order, we regress. And when you regress, you go back worse than where you were when you first started. But it is so worth the journey. Go ahead, brother.
I think you also need to have some communication skills before you approach too. Because if your communication skills are off, or if you're in a certain mood, the tone needs to be right. Because, when you address your issues with that person, they may not be healed yet. So you may trigger them, you may open up something that they may not want to deal with at that point. So if you do, what I mean, look for an opening in the clear, what I mean, before you shoot your shot, and make sure that you're ready to have the conversation, with that person. Because like I said, if you're healed and that person is not, that's going to be a hard conversation for that person to sit there and listen to, So I think, like I said, is have to make sure that you got some some verbal skills under your belt before you go out and have that conversation with somebody about how they hurt you and how they caused you trauma growing up. So
And not just the verbal skills, but sometimes, especially with today's man, we were raised by a bunch of women, so we aren't necessarily in tune emotionally with our masculinity.
mm-hmm.
So we will react as the person who taught us how to react acts. So you will react like a woman. You will be lashing out. You will be belligerent. You will be, not saying that's how women do, but when a
Yeah.
man doesn't act emotionally as a man, when he doesn't necessarily learn how to handle his emotions as a man, he does it as a female, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just what it is. So sometimes that's why you see a lot of us, we can't handle breakups as men. We want to go and strangle somebody, kill somebody, this, that, another. Nah, you got to be able to say, okay, and this is kind of jovial. Go get a drink and sit in the garage.
There you go.
Do something else. You ain't got to put hands on nobody. You don't
Or
have to
drink
pull
some
out a
water.
pistol.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this. You got to be emotionally mature where you can have a conversation, not hear what you want to hear, and say, okay, that's cool.
I'm going to speak as a product of this. And I'm going to speak as a product of someone who wants to actually come to their parents with their trauma. The first step is to understand that addressing this is not disrespectful in any way. It is not disrespectful to understand where you coming from. It's not disrespectful to understand that you need some things addressed. It's not. You don't love your parents any more, any less. You just need some answers. And it's okay for you to go get them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, again, we appreciate you guys. You guys are amazing. I think this, I mean, this isn't this the most amazing chat on YouTube? I mean, do you see those guys? I mean, just man, thank you guys for all that you're doing. We greatly appreciate the value that you added to today's show. This is this is bittersweet for us because this is the last segment. The last segment is called Final Thoughts. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into final thoughts. And with that being said, we're going to start off with my brother from another mother across the table with Chris McClellan.
Final thoughts. In regards to childhood trauma, we all have it. We all need to deal with it. So let's just deal with it. Because the sooner we deal with it, the sooner we deal with it, the sooner we can become the complete people that we're supposed to be. And the sooner we become the complete people that we supposed to be, we can go help build our community the way that it's supposed to be built. Can we please just fix this? That's just let's just fix this because we know something is wrong. And it's not about blame. It's about knowing something is wrong and pulling the trigger on fixing it. So, for the love of all that is good, can we fix this? That's my final thought.
My final thought: how childhood trauma shaped your view on life. Just an overall. Um, I think that first of all, you have to recognize that, like Chris said, most of us, a lot of people have childhood trauma, and that's okay. However, it is not okay to linger in it and to go about your whole adult life with no accountability and not addressing it, because it can affect your relationships. It can affect your relationships with your children. It can affect relationships with your significant other. It can affect relationships even at work. So not dealing with childhood trauma can be very um it can cause a lot of negative effects on your adult life. So I would tell anybody who's listening to this Empowering Perspectives podcast to please, if you are one of those people who are dealing with something from your childhood, to go and get the help that you need to address it. Your mama and them, big mama and them, auntie and TT and them, they don't necessarily have it. They may want to help you, but they may not be trained and have the skills to really deal with whatever you need, So just, go to the right person to get the right support that you need in order so you can have an effective adult life that is free from most of your childhood trauma.
You muted, sir.
I think that we have to realize that the mental and emotional side of childhood trauma is real, and that masking it or normalizing it is something that we do as a measure of learned behavior. So you have to unlearn a lot of things, and in everything that the previous panel has said, you got to unlearn where you were and see that especially when you're out of that area, you're no longer in danger. So it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to bring it up. It's okay to confront people about it, as long as you do it in a manner and in a space that's congruent to you and that person actually coming to a resolve. Because at the end of the day, you're responsible for self. So I know we all think that I need closure. I need somebody else's approval for closure. And no, you need closure for yourself. You need closure from yourself. Sometimes you have to forgive yourself for allowing yourself to be in this position so long, because you know the damage that is done. You know how it hindered you and your family. You know how it hindered you and your relationships. So at the end of the day, when you forgive yourself and when you look and realize that you need a relationship with somebody greater than you, that can handle your problems, that can hold your hand when nobody else will. And then and only then will you truly be healed, and you'll be actually made whole and not just healed.
Listen, there's no need for me to repeat the same thing these gentlemen said. I did a whole bunch of talking previously. I don't have no final words. That's it. We love you guys. We think you guys are amazing. Everybody deserves to move forward in life. Don't ever be handicapped by your past. With that being said, enjoy your weekend. Thank you guys for joining us. We greatly appreciate you for helping us to go through this very difficult conversation. I believe I might be able to convince these guys to do it again, Miss Jordan. So with that being said, you guys have a great and wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back here same time next week, 8 p.m. every Friday for the Hearts of Mankind podcast. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great evening.